All right. Okay. Thank you all for joining for this webinar. Tonight we have another new webinar. My name is Lisa Klein, and I am with UGA Extension in Gwinnett. I have an In the Garden webinar series, a couple nights a month in the evening, and then a lunch and learn, which either I will teach or a lot of times we have special guests who will join us. So a lot of my content is original, and I'm always looking for good options to do new programs on. So if you have any questions at all, or if you have an idea for a future webinar, you're welcome to put that in the chat box. And I will, as you go through this particular webinar, you'll see a lot of QR codes. So I try to use a lot of publications, scientifically based information that I can share. I don't just pull off of Google. um, but if you see something that you think is interesting and you're like, oh man, I missed that, no worries. I record everything and it will all go on our Metro Master Gardener YouTube channel. So you can go back later. It usually takes me a week or so to get those up there. You can go back there later and use that QR code to get that publication about that particular topic. So there's quite a few of them in this particular presentation. So again, don't stress out. If you didn't get it, you can get it later. I'm also happy to share my slide deck with you, and my email address will be at the end. So you can either, get it through the YouTube channel, or you can email me. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to ask that as well. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so this particular presentation is about small space gardening. So a lot of us live in more suburban urban areas now. We don't have a lot of big yards. We have maybe quarter acre, maybe you live in a condo, maybe you're in a townhome, and you just don't have a lot of space to garden. And you still want a garden. Well, you could do a community garden. There's that option, but maybe you don't live near one. So any type of space you have is fair game for doing some type of container gardening or some other type of in-ground gardening. And we're going to kind of cover a bunch of those. And then kind of tacked on to the back end of this is a little bit of a presentation on straw bale gardening. So maybe we live in a rental townhome or house or apartment, and we can't tear up the ground. Maybe you don't want to do container gardening. So this is another option that you can do that is something that lasts for basically the one season, maybe two seasons, and then you get rid of it and you move on. So that will have a publication associated with it, and then some more information on step-by-step directions on how to create that, troubleshooting, good things, bad things about it. I've done it myself, so I will share that with you. So when you're basically doing small scale farming, if you want to call it, or gardening in an urban area, there's a lot of reasons why you might do that. Some people just love to know that they've got a tomato growing out there on their porch and that they can go get a tomato whenever they want. And that's great. How many times have you done Taco Tuesday and you don't have tomatoes? I know it completely ruins the vibe. You have to either run out, or you just don't have or have Taco Tuesday, or you just don't have tomatoes. There's lots of environmental benefits. So air quality, having the ability to have some fresh air in your home. I mean, we can do that with houseplants, but you can also have transient container gardening where maybe it's outside for a bit and then it's inside. Water efficiency, I mean, you can use smart irrigation. Maybe you don't want to waste all that water that's coming off the roof. So pipe it into a barrel and use that to water your containers or your in-ground garden. Pollinator support, hey, we shout this, we evangelize pollinator support because suburbia and urban America are pollinator deserts essentially. So anybody that can do anything for pollinators who come back to the same areas year after year, it's a habit. They've got to learn that you're there. We see up and down populations of butterflies and other types of insects. Every year we have the Great Southeast Pollinator Census that UGA started. And this year, I think we've added Alabama. So now we have North Carolina, South Carolina, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, and hopefully Tennessee soon, if not already. But this is a way that you can be a citizen scientist and you can count pollinators, keep an eye on the populations, and we can see trends and things like that that we may need to look out for, like, oh, is there a problem? Oh, this is great. We see more pollinator gardens, things like that. Mental well-being. I cannot stress enough that the horticultural therapy factor. I mean, I have a background. This is not, I'm not sitting in the garden, but I wish I was. It's nice and peaceful, and most of us enjoy sitting outside. And if you're here, you definitely enjoy that because you took the time to come here. But these are all things that you really enjoy and want to be around. So it can give you a good peace of mind. Community engagement. Hey, it's a great way to meet new friends and strengthen other friends. And then, of course, for composting and things like that, conservation. So, you're doing good things for the environment. All right, let's jump right in. So, types of gardening that you can use for um, areas in, oops, went a little too fast, for areas in suburban or urban areas. So, you can still in ground garden or row garden. It's cheap. You don't really need anything. You've got the soil right there. You don't immediately have to add anything. You can size it up or size it down no matter how you want it. You're not limited by whatever container that you're in. It's very easy to make your own compost and add that in, get cover crops, all that stuff that we do as gardeners. And you've got earthworms in there, you've got your pollinators around, and you can work on that soil and get a really good soil biome. And I do a little bit of that. I also do raised bed gardening. I also do some container gardening, a good mix of that. But here in Georgia, we have some challenges. One is soil. We have heavy clay soil. So, of course, you have to do something with that. Now, blueberries thrive here. You don't have to do a lot to the soil, but if you want tomatoes and other things, you're going to have to put a little work into it. Drainage, you may not have ideal drainage. You may have weeds, maybe we like to think green is good, but not necessarily if it's all weeds. And then pest issues. There's a lot of pests that live in the ground that overwinter there that could cause problems. So while it's good and it works in some situations, sometimes it doesn't. I've got a QR code there about no-till gardening. I did do a presentation on no-till types of gardening and methods and things like that. So this is a little bit of an addition to that. All right, food forests. So there are a few community gardens that are out there in the Gwinnett area. I'm not sure about other counties, but I can, pretty much guess that yes, there probably are some out there that have food forests. So a food forest, it's basically, the fancy word is permaculture, but it's basically a forest that is planted keeping in mind that it has to be easily accessible to the populace that lives in and around that area. It's planted with the simple fact that it's available to anybody. So anyone can come up and pick the blueberries. Anyone can come up and pick an apple that's ripe. If you live in Florida, you can pick an orange or whatever. It's basically available to anybody. It's not meant to be kept behind a gate. Some community gardens are only for members. You don't want your people off the street coming in and picking your produce that you've taken the time to grow. But a food forest is planted with that in mind. So, of course, it's going to support your pollinators. So that's an awesome thing. It's a resilient food source, meaning it's generally planted with not annuals in mind, but perennials. So fruit trees, things that are going to come back year after year, that are going to grow bigger, that are going to produce more food, things that are useful in the landscape, edibles, in other words, edible plants and trees and shrubs that provide food. It's going to improve the soil health, so that's a good thing. We see this done in a lot of parks around here. So Gwinnett County has started with Harvest Gwinnett. I've mentioned them here and there throughout my presentations. They're an awesome 11 community gardens located all throughout Gwinnett County in parks. And some of them are starting with food forests. So, meaning there's some plants that are being planted that are outside of the gates that people can get to. And, there's of course cons to this. Sometimes it takes a while for an apple tree to grow so it can provide enough sustenance. You might have some pest issues. Georgia, as I've said many times, is a hotbed of disease. Our humidity levels, our insects, it's just off the cuff. We have all sorts of problems with that, and there's not much we can do about it. It's just the weather that we're granted. But we can also grow all year round, which is nice. A lot of northern states cannot do that. So we're kind of in the middle. And even though we have good weather, we do have a lot of pests. So that we have to keep in mind that whatever we choose to plant needs to be pretty easy to maintain. So harvesting challenges, if you don't have people coming in and taking the food, then, and your trees get bigger or unwieldy, you may have some challenges. So you do need people that are going to come in and maintain these food forests. Usually not a problem, especially if it's next to a community garden, but you do need some folks that are interested in coming in and helping out. All right, raised bed gardens. So this is a favorite of many, many, many people. All the community gardens in Harvest Gwinnett are raised bed gardens. And a lot of the other community gardens that are around, with the exception of just a few, are all raised bed gardens. This provides better drainage, so you don't have to worry if, like we just got out of May, where we had like twice as much rain as we normally should have. I don't know, I think we had like 6 to 8 inches, something like that. And our evaporation rate isn't really high because it's been fairly cool. So our soils are saturated. We don't have to worry as much. If you have a nice raised bed, that provides better drainage, easier to get your plants in. Fewer weeds and pests. If you maintain that and you keep those weeds plucked out of there, it's harder for weed seeds. There's no seed bed typically to draw from. If you went and had an area of in-ground garden and tilled that up, you probably disturbed a pretty hefty seed bed. So you may be dealing with weeds for years to come. But if you put new soil into a raised bed, you probably don't have to worry about that so much. It's easier to amend that soil too. I mean, a lot of us will just go buy that big yellow bag, soil free, but you can make your own mix. Don't feel like you've got to choose that. There's lots of easy ways to put together a mix. You can do soil, a compost mix. You can do some sand and some vermiculite. You can make your own soilless kind of mix, or you can just go out in your backyard or get some topsoil from a nursery or a landscape place. Mix that in with some compost, and you can make your own. So costs, yeah, you're probably looking at some higher dollar amounts there. I mean, raised beds are not cheap, but you can do some things. There are lots of plans out there. Just make sure you're not using treated lumber. Lots of plans out there for making your own. So maybe you get some trees. Somebody cut a tree down in the neighborhood. And you got some access to some logs and branches. You can do that, and we'll go through another variety of ways you can use those. But it doesn't take up much space. So you can have one big raised bed, a 4x8 or 2x4 or something, whatever size you want to make in your backyard, and you can put it as high as you want or as low as you want. There's a lot of flexibility there. Soil depletion, yeah, you do need to keep adding compost in there every year, and you do need to add fertilizers and amendments because you're not dealing with a mineral soil, one that has everything included. You have to add that in. So just keep in mind, yes, you added that nice raised bed soil and you got multiple bags and you filled it all up, but 2 years later, why are your plants turning yellow? This is because you've depleted all of the nutrients that are in there. So you need to make sure that when you're putting plants in there, that you're fertilizing as well and adding in new organic material pretty about every year or so. Hugelkultur. I talked about this in permaculture, no-till type gardening. I just love saying it. It's kind of fun. But this is a method where you take a bunch of wood. So let's say you cut a tree down or your neighbor cut a tree down, and you just pile that up into a pile, maybe 4 foot tall. I don't know. You can make it as big as you want. And then you start putting all sorts of other stuff on top of it. You're going to put maybe some straw. Maybe you got some newspaper that you're trying to get rid of. Cardboard, anything that's biodegradable is fair game here. And then you're going to put some type of compost or soil on there, and then it will start to degrade. Okay, and that's what you want. You want it to start degrading, because that's all that breakdown of those nutrients that's going to provide all of that good stuff that those plants need and want. So you can plant a whole garden on one of these if you want to. uh, you've got all sorts of good stuff. That area is very big. It's tall, so it's easy. You don't have to bend over. It'll hold moisture. So if just to kind of compare it, we get calls from people from subdivisions. A lot of the builders had what they dumped all of their old building material into a hole, and then they covered it with soil. And then over time, they end up with a sinkhole. It's kind of what you're doing here, but it's not really the same problem. You're just putting all of the trees and the branches and everything that maybe you just cut down for whatever reason, but you're going to benefit from it. You don't have to worry about a sinkhole forming. So it's going to be great as those organic materials break down. It's basically just a big compost pile. It's got good drainage. You don't have to worry there. You're doing something very sustainable. That's permaculture, if you want that word in there. It does take a lot of work. I did watch a neighbor that I have to drive by periodically to go to the grocery store struggle for 3 months to get all of those logs into a pile. He had a big oak tree taken down, and it was whew, it made me tired just watching him. So, just if you're going to do it, make sure that you understand there's going to be some work involved. It is a lengthy process, okay? So, this is not something that is going to happen overnight. You do have to do a little bit of work. Excuse me. Um, but know that it is a good thing. It's reusing, recycling, and you don't have to pay for the inert landfill to haul off all of that tree material. You can end up with some rodents and pests and snakes and things like that, because remember, above all, it's just a big pile of tree branches and stuff. It takes a while for all of that to break down. So it makes homes for the other things that are out there that like that too. So maybe don't locate it near the house. You want it somewhere out in the back. Square foot gardening. So this is a favorite. We see this at the home show. We've had people that have come and tried to sell systems. It's a very popular thing. If you don't have a lot of space, then this might be for you. If you have a raised bed, maybe you don't have, but a sandbox sized raised bed that you can put in there, maybe a 2 by 2 area or something like that. There's all sorts of infographics out there on the internet that you can find where they give you the exact layout, how many of each type of seed or plant to place in there. They give you exact directions. So one of those is the Wisconsin extension QR code that I've got up there for you. So again, don't worry about trying to get that. You can always come back later. I'm happy to share the slide deck with you. It's very efficient. So you can get a lot of stuff in there. Maybe it's just you. Maybe you don't need a whole lot of space, but you want fresh stuff. So you can have this. Sometimes people will put little 1 by 1 sticks out there. Maybe they'll just take a piece of twine or something and lay that across. There's a lot of different ways of marking off that grid, whatever's easiest. It's pretty easy because it just simplifies everything. You don't really have to come up with a plan. Somebody's already come up with it for you. It's very small, not a lot of weeding, that kind of stuff. But conversely, you don't get to grow a lot of stuff either. You do have to come up with the raised bed, so you're going to have to buy the initial materials. But overall, it's probably a pretty good choice for you if you just don't have a ton of space. Maybe just a small plot of land out in your backyard, because you're in a little townhome or something like that, or maybe you're in a rental home and you can get away with doing something like this. But it doesn't grow a whole lot, so it's probably not good for a family of 8. Keyhole design. So this is something that is used a lot in very dry areas. Sub-Saharan Africa, we'll see sometimes people use this out in Arizona. Uh, but it also works really well here, just because it is a very compact design that is very efficient. You've got a compost bin in the middle. You have an area that you walk up to, and you put your compost into that middle area. And then you either have stone, like in here you see you've got a stone retaining wall that fits that keyhole area. You can use sticks and branches interwoven. I've seen that. You can, just build it with boards that you get. You can scrap lumber. I've seen people use silt fence, anything that will hold that soil in. So you basically are going to have that compost bin, and you can see how that's got some drainage at the bottom. And then you've got other organic matter on the bottom, and then you put some good soil on top, plant your stuff in there, and then the theory is that whatever you're putting into that compost bin in the middle, those nutrients are going to work their way out into that soil so that all those plants that you put in there for your garden, those will have that good compost or organics that will help grow whatever you're putting in there. It's also kind of compact, so whatever water you put in there, that's going to kind of percolate down through, and the roots of your plants will grow deep to get those nutrients. And it's just supposed to be a very compact, very smart design. So there are others. There's this is a keyhole, but there's also spiral designs. I did talk about that in a permaculture webinar that I did. And the theory on that also, that's used in very arid locations, is that the water kind of trickles down. So it starts up high and then it kind of works its way down to the very bottom, and you put different types of plants all the way. So you start watering up here, and then all of that kind of trickles down until you've got plants that don't need as much water down at the bottom. Very efficient. So this is very labor intensive because you have to build it first. You're not just tilling up the ground and throwing some seeds or plants in there. So you actually have to build it. If you're going to do it with stone or a retaining wall material or something like that, that's going to take a lot of labor and money. There's a school garden. You'll have to forgive me. I can't remember which school it is in Gwinnett County. My counterpart, Kim Fritz, does a lot with them. She's the schools coordinator, but they actually have a keyhole garden. And it's really interesting to see actually things growing in it and how efficient it is. It's very interesting. So this might be an option if you just have a very limited area, but can put some permanent structure in there. Plant pyramid. So this one is a temporary, meaning you can move it. I've not seen a ton of these, but I think they're pretty interesting. And here you see one that's got flowers and things like that on, but you could plant whatever you want in here. You could plant strawberries. I think that'd be great for strawberries. You can plant herbs, definitely. You could plant some tomatoes towards the bottom. As long as it's in a sunny spot, and as long as whatever plants you have on the one side, if that gets most of the sun, and the stuff that needs less sun on the other side, as long as you're putting things with the growing conditions in mind for that particular plant, they'll be happy. So what you're doing here is, again, maximizing vertical space, and you'll see there'll be a few more selections for that. Easy to maintain, so if you can't bend over because you got bad knees or whatever, you can just plant up at the top and just maintain that. Very easy maintenance. Efficient drainage, you water up at the top, it trickles down, can't beat that. It looks really pretty. So whether you're putting vegetables or you've got ornamentals, either way, works great. Cons, it's going to either be really expensive if you're paying somebody to build it or to make it. So it's not something like you buy one of these raised bed kits where you get the little corner pieces and then you just push the wood down in there and you've got 4 corners and boom, you're done. Yeah, you actually have to build this thing. You're going to have limited root depth. You can't really do root vegetables like turnips or beets because there's just not a lot of space, and certainly not really potatoes because there's just not much space for their roots to grow. It'll dry out faster. So you're going to have to come up with a drip irrigation system or something that's going to service that because here in Georgia, it will dry out very quickly. So you have to make sure that you take care of that. And uneven growth, depending on what you're using in there or fertilizing, if you've got fertilizer in the water, the stuff up top might get really happy and the stuff down at the bottom is getting shortchanged. So just make sure that you take those issues into account. And again, you've got a couple of QR codes with publications that you can check out there later if you would like. Step gardens. So this is a great thing to have here in Georgia because a lot of houses are going to have really uneven yards. There are a lot of hilly places around here. I have seen some yards that are scary. Most times people just end up sitting in the house and they don't go out and use their yard, and that's a shame. You paid all that money for that house and you can't use the yard. Well, this makes it so that you can. Yes, there's a lot of setup. Yes, it can be very expensive, but once you're done and you've got it all laid out, you will thank yourself for spending the money because now you have a usable yard. Instead of the steep drop off or a really slopey hill, you now have a terraced garden area. So you can put blueberries in there, you can put ornamental roses, you could grow a whole vegetable garden in there, you can grow all sorts of stuff. It's going to optimize that backyard that you haven't been using. Your drainage is going to be pretty good because instead of a low area where it all sits, maybe you had a lake down there at the bottom. Now you don't have to have that. So instead of all that water running down the hill, you've got now gardens. So all that water is going to slow down, less erosion. And the water is going to infiltrate into those beds. Whatever plants you have there will use that. And you're going to get some benefit out of it because you get crops or you get the beauty from the flowers, for the pollinators, that kind of thing. And it's going to be really pretty once it's all grown in and looks good. It will improve your property value. So if that's your backyard and it's crazy and you don't ever use it, consider doing something like this. And you can check out this publication, Gardening on Slopes and Hillsides from Iowa State. Curved beds. So this is just, there's no scientific anything to this. It's just an interesting way of doing some landscaping in on your property. Maybe you have a really boring, four-sided backyard with a privacy fence, and you're trying to figure out what can I do to make this look a little different, a little better. You can go a couple tiers on a curved bed. That will allow you to have multiple layers. You can have flowers in the back and you can have vegetables up front, all sorts of things that you can do. It helps these boring backyards that we get in subdivisions look a lot better. I mean, now you can go out there in your backyard and have your nice hardscape and your chairs, and you can sit there and enjoy the beautiful plants that you've got growing out there, and your neighbors are going to be jealous because of what you've got going on in your yard. Cons, it can be kind of expensive because I mean, look at all the landscaping stones that you have to purchase and the topsoil and everything that you've got to put in there. So you might have to hire somebody unless you're real handy with that kind of stuff. You might have some drainage issues because your water movement can be uneven. It really depends on the whole lay of the land. And again, it might be a little harder to landscape around there. You might have to get the string trimmer out, the little weed whacker. But again, there are things that you can do, and it's very aesthetically pleasing. Container gardening. So this is one anybody can do. This is one that's very popular. Anything can be a container. I have a presentation called Pretty and Productive, and it can be anything can grow in a container. It just depends on what you want to grow. You can see here in a couple of the pictures, you've got a balcony. They've got a whole garden set up out there. You can buy those little raised beds that are on legs like that, and you can put a vegetable garden in there. You can set up some shelves and have flowers. I mean, you really can turn it into something special, a little green oasis, if you will. And you can do that, in an area out back too. If you can't really, put anything in the ground because you have really bad soil, Maybe it's very heavily compacted and you just don't have the ability to dig down into that. Hey, put some landscape fabric down, get yourself some containers, put a little mulch down to make it look nice, and fill them up, call it a day. That's what these people up here in the top picture did. Looks really good. So very space saving. You know, you can do anything, any amount, small, big, whatever, portable, move it around. If you've got sun for part of the day in one area, and not, there and you need more, you can just put it on casters and wheel it over to the other side of the yard. You can customize the soil, so you can have succulents, you can have, plants that need a higher organic content. So much you can do. I mean, so much. Just the sky's the limit. So don't feel like you're weighed down to the ground. You can do just about anything. And again, the extended growing season. So I tell people here, citrus is the forbidden fruit. We cannot grow it here yet. I know you're going to say, I know somebody that has a Myers lemon. Okay, maybe you do, and maybe they've gotten lucky, but probably not in the next 5 years because we live in a transition zone here, and sometimes we get nice and warm weather for, 3, 4, 5, 10 years, and then sometimes we don't. Like, what, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, we had 60 hours of below zero weather, and a lot of stuff died. So, not quite yet. If you lived in Macon, yes, but not quite yet. We lost a lot of plants back then. So, yes, if you want to do citrus, put it in a pot, put it on some casters so you can roll it around, and you can leave it outside for a good part of the time. But when we get some cold weather, you need to wheel it in the garage. So, the cons on that, you got to water a lot. It gets pretty hot here in the summer, and you're constantly going to be watering. So know the watering requirements for whatever plants you have. Set up a drip system, pay the neighbor kid down the block, whatever you need to do. Just know that you've got to water more frequently because your plants are not in the ground. They're actually above ground. You're going to only have limited root space. So if you've got a big lemon tree, you're going to have to put that in a huge pot. You're actually going to have to probably transplant more often unless you're just doing annuals like your vegetable crops or something. It's going to cost a lot too. Some people just put them in regular old plastic tubs they get from Walmart. That's great, but those plastic tubs are UV sensitive and so they will break down after a season or two. The tubs aren't cheap either. They'll probably run you about 15 bucks. So if you're having to replace bins every couple years because the radiation is kind of breaking them down, you might want to think about a different type of pot. There's just lots of things to think about. And they are more susceptible to freeze and thaw cycles, overheating and freezing. So you have to kind of keep that in mind and be willing to move them. All right, hanging gardens. So you can buy a fancy planter. I think we've seen them online. You can buy them on Amazon because you can buy anything on Amazon, where the tomato grows out the bottom and then you can plant stuff up on the top. They're really expensive. They're like 50 or 60, 70 bucks. Why? Just go get yourself a bucket and cut a hole on the bottom of that bucket. You can see they've got some tomatoes. You can do potatoes that way. There's a lot of stuff that you can grow upside down. And if you want to, you can also grow stuff up on the top. I mean, here they've just got them hanging off a balcony, or not a balcony, but the roof along their deck. But if you have them on a pulley system, which that's a smart way to do it too, you can just do a pulley system so you can let it down. You could put all sorts of things in there. You could grow some cucumbers. You could grow, I don't know, eggplants. You can grow other things in there. So very space efficient if you don't have much space. Pet or pest control, you're not out in the garden, you're up on a deck or a backyard. So yes, you'll have some pests, but you don't have to deal with the ground and all the pests that are there. You don't have to deal with the varmints like the voles coming to eat whatever you have. You can control a lot of that. And you've got better air circulation. A lot of times in a raised bed, we try to cram it all in there. So you end up with more problems. Got to water it more. You don't have as much room for root space, and you might have problems with the wind, but it is a good option to investigate if you don't have much more than maybe a deck. Vertical gardens, very space saving. improved airflow. You can easily harvest them. You can do all sorts of stuff on here. You don't have to do vegetables. You can do pretty much anything. And this Farmer's Almanac has all sorts of ways, tips to plan how to build one. You can use them with like pallets and things like that. So many options. You do have to water pretty frequently, depending on how you're going to hang whatever plants you have. If you're choosing some of those felt pockets to hang up there, know that those don't hold water very well. So you're going to have to set up some type of a timer and a drip hose on the top of that to keep those moist. Otherwise, they'll dry out really quickly here. So just keep that in mind. If you are building some kind of a frame, this can get really heavy. So you need to make sure that whatever you're doing, if you're not paying for a professional setup where you've got like a metal frame or something, you've got to actually invest in lumber and brackets and all of that stuff that will hold that. Unless you get a system where you can just hang it on a wall someplace or something along there. Again, easy to harvest because you don't have to bend down. If you've got a balcony and that's all you've got because you live in a condo, hey, hang it up on the wall. It works. Living green walls are a big thing and people pay a lot of money for them. So you can easily design one yourself. Um, there's a lot of materials out there that you can get information on them. TP trellis, this is just a space saver. This can be used anywhere. So if you have a raised bed in a community garden, you can use one of these. I know a lot of people will use cattle panels, the metal cattle panels that are, I believe they're like 4 inches squares. If it's just you and you're 80, that's going to be kind of hard. So unless you've got somebody to help you, this is pretty easy. You can get tomato stakes, the tall tomato stakes, and just tie them together and put that down in your raised bed. Maybe you got a lot of bamboo that your neighbor has in their yard and it's creeping into your yard. You can go cut that and make that into a teepee trellis. You can get sticks out of the woods. There's lots of ways that you can get materials to put together to do this, but this is great for if you want to do pole beans, you can do some squashes, cucumbers, that kind of thing. It basically is getting everything to grow up instead of out. So it's a vertical space. It's going to maximize that. Again, not many crops are going to use this, but you can work it into the middle, like a Three Sisters kind of thing, where you have your squash that trails out, your pole beans, and then maybe like corn or something like that. It's just an option to use it. You do have to worry about it falling over if it gets windy. So just make sure, however you do that, that you have a way to kind of anchor it down. Hydroponics, I'm not going to go into this a ton. There's a lot of small scale hydroponics, a couple of publications there if you're interested, but maybe you don't have a lot of space. They make systems that you can have inside that are just tiny tabletop ones. You can make some like this that are outside out of PVC pipes. Very efficient because it's all contained. You just have your crops growing out of small holes. Your plants will grow quicker and easier to harvest, like this one. You could just walk up and harvest that lettuce, but initial costs are higher. I will say, if you watch Facebook Marketplace, sometimes you can find systems for free or cheap. I have come across a couple where somebody was moving or they just didn't want to do it anymore, and they were giving away their whole system. Now, granted, it's, kind of cruddy and you have to clean it up, but that's the materials. So if you watch, sometimes you get lucky and you can find that. Also, limited crop selection. Yes, you can kind of grow a lot of stuff using hydroponics, but some things are easier to grow than others. And so unless you're just really super into it, you're probably going to end up finding yourself sticking with lettuces, greens, and that kind of stuff, and you may get tired of that. I don't know, but yeah, it's a good and interesting way to do it. And if you want to just kind of tinker around, there's a lot of good systems out there that you can find plans for. And then mixing and matching. So this is kind of the end of the different small suburban urban type gardens and the selections for small spaces. So basically it's all about what you want. This is just an AI generated image. This is probably the holy grail for somebody that really wants that if they have a small space, but it's really kind of whatever you want. Don't be afraid to put a whole bunch of different stuff together. Who says you can't do square foot gardening in a plastic tub from Walmart? No, you can't fit 20 different, square foot areas in there, but you might be able to fit four or five. There's a lot of different things that you can do. Don't be afraid to just go out there and try them. You just have to make sure that you're knowing what you're doing with the soil and you're making sure that those plants get the nutrients they need. So fertilizing is very important. Make sure you're using something that's going to have the micronutrients in addition to the regular nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. So when you get that fertilizer bag, it'll have those three letters, or sorry, not letters. Well, I guess they are letters. Sometimes the numbers too, the 10, 10, 10, or, 0, 5, 8, or whatever it is. Those are the big ones that the plants need the most of, but they also need the micronutrients. They need somewhere between 13 and 16 different elements in varying amounts. So a lot of the fertilizers that you get, you want to make sure you look for them to be complete. They have to say complete. Whether that's an organic or an inorganic, you've got to have them say complete because we get lots of calls and emails from folks with plants that are nutrient deficient and they're yellow or they got funny colors or their veins are showing. And it's because they've had the same plant in a pot for 10 years. They've used all the nutrients in that soil. So think about your repotting regime, the RR, the repotting regime. You want to make sure that you're repotting every couple of years and also fertilizing. Your house plants and your outside plants, if they're in containers, would appreciate that. And they'll look a lot healthier and happier too. So just, keep that in mind. And now we're going to move on to straw bale gardening. So again, this is a good option if you have a hardscape. Maybe you just have a parking lot. They gave you a parking lot and you just don't have any other options. So you're looking for something that you can use that's going to be really good, but that's not going to stay around forever. And that's straw bale gardening. I have tried this and I will give you little antidotes as we move through. So the benefits, it's going to be very inexpensive and accessible. So you can go down to Home Depot or Ace Hardware or wherever, and you can get a wheat straw bale, which they're pretty hefty. They're going to weigh about 60 pounds and they're big, but you can get those for about $5 or $6. So if you don't have a lot of space, you could get four of those and I'll walk you through the ways that you prep them. And then you can grow a garden in there. I mean, way cheaper than getting lumber and putting together a raised bed. And it goes away after a year and a half. You just kick it off into the woods. Or you call your friend and say, hey, I've got some decomposing straw here. Do you want it? It's got all sorts of good stuff in it. And they may come down and get it. So good drainage, weed and pest reduction. So depending on where it is, where it's located, it's not in contact with the soil. So you don't have as much of that. You also, if you've got blight in your garden and you have a problem with tomatoes, this might be a solution for you. Originally, that's why I tried it, because I had blight in the soil in my raised bed. So I got some straw bales and prepped them and put my tomatoes in there. And that was actually a pretty good year for them. We had some issues with lack of rain later in the summer and I was on vacation and yeah, they kind of died. But that was more on me than the method. Very portable and temporary. You can get rid of them. Extended growing season. So if you prep these in the spring, it takes about 2.5 weeks to prep them. You can start a little bit earlier because you've still got, and we'll explain why, some heat in there as it starts to decompose. Eco-friendly. If you got really bad soil, you don't have to worry about it. You can use this. And once it's done, sits a little higher, kind of like a raised bed. So you don't have to bend over as much. Here's what you can grow. So it's just some pictures. You can see you can do herbs. Middle, you've got tomatoes, and they made a nice arch. You've got lettuce. You can grow lettuce, so you can use them year round. Squash, you can grow those. Cucumbers, as long as you provide a trellis for them to grow up, and cabbage. So you can use them year round. You don't have to just use them for a summer garden. You can use them for a winter garden as well. So some considerations, make sure you use the correct type of bale. So if you go someplace and you're like, let's say you go to Tractor Supply, you can buy hay at Tractor Supply because remember, horses eat hay. Make sure you ask for straw, preferably wheat straw. That's what they're going to have. Wheat straw is going to be yellow. Hay is generally going to be kind of a greenish, yellowish, and that's what you feed your animals, farm animals, horses, cows, goats, that kind of thing. You want to use that straw. We'll talk more about that, why. But basically, it's to avoid all the seeds that are mixed in with the hay. Positioning. So same thing with an in-ground garden. You want to make sure that you're getting the right sun exposure. So you need to either use one of those apps on your phones or go stand out there at certain times of the day to see if you get enough sunshine. Conditioning process. So don't expect in the summer that you're going to be able to go get your straw bales and plant your plants in there the same day. It takes about 2 to 2.5 or 3 weeks, depending on how aggressive you are with managing them. So make sure you plan ahead. Planting, there's a couple different ways of doing it. Some people will just, start doing it in the fall. And in the spring, they'll come in and directly plant into the bale. So they're planting way ahead. Some people are just conditioning them the 2 weeks before, adding some planting or soil mix to it, and then planting directly in that. So you have to kind of figure out what you want. Watering, they dry out faster, just like a raised bed does, or a container. So you need to make sure you're watering. Make sure you're giving structural support. Same thing if it's in ground or in a raised bed. You got to use a tomato cage. You got to use something for your cucumbers or your beans to crawl up. You've got to have something. You can't just leave them there. And remember, these will break down within a couple seasons. So be thinking about what you're going to do with that material. Put it in your compost bin or whatever. Give it away after a while. And know that because this is the vegetative matter and it is breaking down, it's a compostable type of material, you're going to have slugs, rodents, voles, and things like that that are going to be in and around that area. So as it breaks down more, you're probably going to have more and more issues. So some people will actually put little wooden containers around these. There's different things you can do, but I didn't have that much problem, but just something to look out for. All right, designs, again, whatever works. If you have a small area, you can only fit 3 bales, do that. You can see there this person has just an area that they've squared off and they've got containers around it. They've got 6 bales in there, down at the bottom. You can see how you're supposed to do the orientation. So you've got those strings, usually it's red or blue strings. Those are going to go around on the sides. The top, you plant on the top side, the side that does not have the strings on them. But you can do them in whatever configuration you want. You see the bottom one has, I think it looks like a question mark. You can also do fun things like you can run, if you've got a garden that's already existing, you can run these straw bales around the outer edge. Maybe you got a problem with rabbits or something like that. I don't know if they're going to jump over this. You could make a little gate, keep Peter Rabbit out. And you can use them for things like putting pollinator type plants in there. You don't have to put vegetables. You can put other stuff in there. But yeah, all sorts of good things. Just make sure that whenever you're butting them up against each other, that you're doing it with the long and the shorts like that. So you see up in the very tippy top, they've got the short to the short. And then if you have them side by side, you've got the strings butted up against each other. So you just always have to remember you got to be able to reach one direction or the other, just like in a raised bed. So just make sure that you account for that. All right, step-by-step directions. So fertilizing the bales. So again, I've mentioned a couple times, this is probably like a 2-week type deal. So you're going to start watering those bales. So plan ahead. you're going to use a real high nitrogen fertilizer. You can go grab a fertilizer that has a really like 2800. If you don't care if it's organic, a good lawn fertilizer will work well for that if you can find one for grass. You're going to mix that a quarter cup of that in with a gallon of water, and you're going to distribute that over the top of one bale. If you want organic, you can do blood meal and you can sprinkle that over the top, and then you're going to water that. And you're to do that for days 4 through 9. So you're just going to put water and water them until they're saturated on days 1 to 3. So wherever you're putting it, make sure you put it there. You don't want to move it later because it's going to be too heavy. Days 4 to 9, that's when you're putting that high nitrogen fertilizer in there. And then day 10, you're going to stop adding that high nitrogen fertilizer and you're going to switch over to a balanced or a complete fertilizer. That's the one that has the micronutrients. Because remember, this is equivalent to a raised bed. You've got to add all those nutrients in there for that plant to use, because if you don't, it won't have what it needs. It's missing some of the nutrients. So continue to do that. And then what you're going to do is you're going to get yourself a compost thermometer. That's one right down there. You can see it shows you when you're normal range, and then a little bit warm, active. That's when the little germs, if you will, the bacteria are in there working their magic, the thermophiles, and helping to break down that vegetative matter. You don't want to go messing around and putting all of your tender little seedlings in there when it's up in the red range. That means that you've got your thermophiles are really working hard. So if you're driving past an area they just cleared out to put a new subdivision in the wintertime, and you see those big piles of wood that they've shredded up and they're steaming, that's what's going on there. You've got those thermophiles are starting to break down that wood cellulose material and do all their magic for starting to decompose. So you don't want to do anything, put any plants in there until that temperature creeps back down below 100 degrees. Very important that you do that. And you can check out that publication from West Virginia Extension on straw bale gardening. So fertilizing, again, I mentioned here's days 1 through 14 in prepping. You're going to get yourself either decide if you're going to do organic or inorganic, but you need that high nitrogen fertilizer. So that's either a grass-based, something for grass, Zoysia or Bermuda, whatever, or blood meal. That's what you're going to use. And then when you switch after day 10 to micronutrients or a more balanced type of fertilizer, and you can find that in organics. It's just they put a lot of different types of organics together. You need to keep watering because you're trying to get all that to infiltrate down into that straw bale. Those little bacteria that are doing all that heavy lifting for you are using a lot of nitrogen. So you're wanting them to break it down, and you're wanting the bacteria to kind of switch back over to not the thermophiles, the ones at the real high temperatures, but the ones that are finishing that compost. And so when that temperature starts to tick back down again, that's when you're getting closer to being able to use that straw bale. And that's when you need to start adding in some of that complete fertilizer so that it's all ready for your plant when you're ready to put it in there. And this is kind of what it should start looking like. So you see it's real dark and it's kind of wet, and it's got kind of a sweeter composty smell to it. That's telling you, hey, we're about done. We're ready to go. So prepping, once it's past that point where you've prepped the bale with the fertilizer and you've got the decomposition process to where it needs to be in the cooler phase, you're going to take a hand trowel. This is a lot of work. I did this. A lot of work. I recommend you do what this person down here does, where they have an auger. It's an auger drill bit. You can actually use this to drill holes for bulbs if you want to plant bulbs here, but it's great for heavy clay soil. It's also great for straw bales. So just get a drill, one of these little bitty drills that is not was it a compound drill? I'm not big into machinery and things, but impact drill, that's it. You got to have something that can handle that. So it's going to chew that straw up that you've worked so hard to get to break down. It's going to chew that up. And that's good. That's what you want to do. So you can either use a shovel, you can use that hand trowel or whatever else you want to do, or you can just get the power tool. It'll go a lot faster, and I guarantee you won't have carpal tunnel syndrome afterwards. It's worth it. But then after you do that, you're going to add about 2 inches of a container garden type of mix mixed with some type of compost. You can use black cow, you can use mushroom compost. If you've got some compost from your own bin, that's fine. You can even use mineral soil compost. Maybe you got some really bad clay soil out there and you're going to toss a little bit of that with some sand and then some compost and make your own mix. You can do that. Put that on top of that broken up top layer of broken down straw, and then you're going to water that in. And what you're trying to do is to get that to infiltrate a little bit. Okay. Your plant roots need something to grow into. So you're trying to create kind of this little container for them. It's a lot of work, but again, there's nutrients to be had there. So you're reusing Mother Nature's leftovers after they've harvested the wheat field. So look at it that way if that helps. And this is days 1 through 3 afterwards. So here's what you're doing. So this is after you're done prepping, when you're putting that soil in there. So you're going to top dress that bale with an additional 2 inches or so. And you can see they're adding some at that top there. And that could be all-purpose compost. You've got Dr. Earth there, or another organic raised bed, or again, mineral soil. You've got your trowel down there. You can go out the back of your garden and get some of that and some builder sand and mix that in there. And then water that in slowly and keep adding that planting mix, because you're making a bread bowl. Like you go to Panera Bread and you put the soup in the bowl and then you eat, and then you can eat the bread bowl too. That's kind of what you're doing here. You're adding all that good stuff in there and you're mixing all of that up so that those plants have something to grow into. Keep watering too. All right, planting. So now it's time to plant. And you're like, okay, what do I do? Do I do it differently than I would if it was in the ground? The question is, or the answer is no, not really. But you do have to be careful about squishing too much stuff in there. I know that's a problem in a lot of raised beds too. Maybe you're leasing a bed at a community garden. You can't cram too much stuff in there. You still have to think about airflow. Again, Atlanta's a hotbed of disease. We don't want to add too much stuff in here, because unless that air can flow through there, you're going to have the same problems on a straw bale that you have in a raised bed or in an in-ground garden if you have too much of a good thing. So just keep that in mind. But you can see here, if you're wanting to put transplants in, or if you want to put seeds in, this is how you're going to do it. So with the transplants, you're going to dig down, and this is after you've already completed putting all of that soil mix into that, and you're all done, you're ready to go. You dig a hole in there, you're going to put your transplant, your tomato, your pepper, whatever, and then you might go back with a little bit extra of that soil mix. It's okay if you've got a mounded area. Remember, that straw mix is going to continue to degrade, and that's going to sink. So eventually, by the end of the summer, it's probably going to be depressed a little bit. So it's okay if you put a little extra in there and you're actually mounded. For seeds, the same way you do it if you were in ground. Just make sure you're looking to see at the depth. This is easier to do. Like some people, they don't put any soil mix in there. They just start in the fall, and in the spring, they just plant directly into what's there with the bale. You can do that. Just know it's going to be a little more difficult to kind of keep track of what you're doing with your seeds. So just make sure that you're planting them at the correct depth. You're planting them at the correct distance apart, that kind of thing. Just follow the back of your seed packet, just like you would if you were planting into the ground or a container. Spacing. So here are some loosey-goosey, not that loosey-goosey, because that publication that I had on the first slide talking about straw bales actually lists out some of this. So it all comes from a scientific-based location. But you can get about 1 to 2 indeterminate or 2 to 3 determinate tomatoes per bale. And then 2 to 3 pepper, okra, broccoli, eggplants, 5 to 6 kale, Swiss chards, 3 to 4 bush bean plants. You can do pole beans too. You just remember you got to have some type of a supporting trellis network on there, something for them to climb on. 12 to 15 snap pea plants with the trellis, bush beans, 4 climber cucumbers, squash plants, couple 2 to 3 of those, spaced regularly across the bale, 3 to 4 strawberry plants, and 8 herb plants. I have potatoes there, but those are harder to do. Note that if you're going to do potatoes in a straw bale, you really have to dig down deep, almost 3/4 of the way through that bale. So I'm going to suggest to you that if you want to do potatoes in a straw bale, do it the second year, because at that point, that straw will have decomposed enough that it really is nice and easy to mix, and you can add some more raised bed soil and that kind of stuff in there and make it a little bit easier. They can get hot. So just remember, we're running a little late. I'm almost done. You're going to have the decomposition process continuing as you're growing. So presumably you are through the biggest part of that decomposition cycle, because the temperature has dropped at this point. It has to do that before you plant. But you're still going to have, excuse me, a high nitrogen demand and heat generation. So you have to continue to fertilize as you go through, because you're doing the nutrient cycling process. So just keep that in mind, and always, always, always keep fertilizing. Don't just stop after that initial cycle. You're going to want to keep. Nitrogen deficiency is going to be your number one issue here. That's what it looks like right there, where you see that yellow. It's going to be your new leaves are going to come out on whatever plant it is, and they're going to be yellow. So that's the sign that you're going to look for. Hopefully you don't have that, and hopefully you are doing a better job in fertilizing as you need, but that's going to be your biggest problem. Troubleshooting, we'll kind of speed through here. Don't skip the conditioning process. It's not going to work well. And then you'll be like, I spent all that money on hay bale or straw bales and it didn't even work. Yeah, do it right. Start early, do it right. Better to start back in January or early February on this process than May and try to skip through 2 weeks of that. Okay, just, do it the right way. Using the wrong material. You don't use hay, use straw. Okay, make sure you do that. Planting too early. Not too early in the season, although that does stand true also. You don't want to do it before you have the last frost date. I mean, don't plant too early while it's still in the active decomposition phase. You're going to cook the roots of whatever plant you put in there, and then you just have to go back and buy more, which for some people, that's okay. I don't want you wasting money. Make sure that you see that compost thermometer down there. You want that red line to be below 100. Here it's showing at 80. That's great. That means it's done. If it is over 100, it's too hot. You need to let it wait. And this is somewhat temperature dependent, okay? So just make sure that you've got some type of a composting thermometer. You can get them off Amazon. They're cheap. And stick that in there. Follow that, watch that, make sure that you're not putting it in there too early. Overwatering, yes, you can overwater. It can get swampy in there, and mildewy and moldy, which ultimately you don't want with your plants. If it was sitting off by the side and you didn't really care, oh well, but you want to put your plants in there. So don't overwater. Also, don't underwater. Again, they can get kind of dry because they're sitting up above the ground and there's little cracks and crevices and all that in there. Make sure that you're watering enough. And if the conditions are super hot, super windy, super dry, make sure you're compensating. Don't ignore pests. They're going to find your stuff just like they will in your garden, in your pot, or in the ground, or hanging in your basket. They're still going to find it. So I tell people, integrated pest management, everybody does it. You probably just don't put a label on it. Get your toolbox out. You still got to flip those leaves over. You still got to look for bugs. You still got to look for rodent damage. You still have to do all of that. You can't hang that up and call it a day. You still have to look for pests. Plant support, make sure you're taking that into account. You've got to have supports for your tomatoes, you got to have supports for your beans, your, other stuff. You've got to make sure that you've got something for it to climb on. Okay. So just go ahead and go buy those supports. Um, Overcrowding, again, we talked about that. You don't want to do it because lack of airflow, you're going to get disease, you'll get plants that'll die, and then you'll just wonder why you wasted all that time and effort when, if you'd done it right the first time, you would still have your plants and be harvesting. Choosing unsuitable plants. So deep rooted crops like carrots or potatoes, they are going to struggle a little bit. You can do a potato in a potato bag. They're cheap. You can get a 5 pack of 10-pound bags at Amazon for like 12 bucks. How do I know? I just bought some. Um, very cheap. Don't worry about it. There are other plants that are better suited to this. So don't do the square peg in the round hole kind of thing. Don't neglect to fertilize. I mentioned this is a nitrogen sink. This is going to continue to decompose. You've got to add more nitrogen in there. Your plants are going to use up the little bit of nutrients that are in that soilless mix. Make sure you're adding back in a complete fertilizer, Miracle Grow, whatever. I mean, just make sure it says complete. It's got to have those micronutrients in there as well. And not thinking about the end of the season. You want your deposit back at your townhome? Make sure that you scrape this off and throw it in the woods or get rid of it. Basically, don't just leave it there. Um, it can be an eyesore after a couple years. I've got a bale that was sitting over here on my patio that I didn't end up using in my garden, and now it's just a big hill of mushy straw that I'm like, what the heck am I supposed to do with this? So I need to go chuck it into the woods. But make sure you have a plan for what you're going to do with it, and it may end up being that as long as you didn't have any disease on any of your plants, you can put it in your compost bin and then it goes and makes compost. So that's it. I only went 7 minutes over. That's like a record for me. So this is my contact information. I mentioned that if you would like the slide deck, feel free to email me at this email address, lisa.klein@gwinnettcounty.com. I also have a UGA one, lisa.klein@uga.com. edu. Sorry, I have like 4 email addresses. But this is the one I kind of keep them separate for different things. So this is the one that I typically work with most customers and clients on. So if you'd like a copy of it, feel free to email me. I am happy to share it. I do, as I mentioned, several different classes a month. I have 2 in the evening, usually alternating weeks, and then I have a lunch and learn on a Tuesday. Usually they're a Tuesday, and it'll either be me talking about a subject or I have guest hosts or guest speakers that come in and talk about a variety of stuff. And occasionally we'll have workshops. We've got one coming up on viticulture. How do we prune muscadines? That's going to be in December. And then I'm going to have a couple of folks from Georgia Forestry Commission coming in, I think it's November, and we'll be meeting here and they'll be showing you how to prune with risk in mind, meaning what do you do if you've got a dead branch from storm damage hanging over a section of your pool or your driveway? How do you want to reduce the risk of certain trees as you're training them to grow? Things like that, real important stuff. They're going to help teach folks how to look at that kind of stuff so that you don't have these dangerous trees on your property branches and things like that, and how to properly prune. They'll also teach about that. So if you have thoughts and ideas on things you would like to see, send me a note via email. I'm happy to do that. Again, I also record these and they are available on the Metro Master Gardener YouTube channel. There's a QR code that'll take you right there. And I have all sorts of stuff. There's some stuff on organics, nutrient deficiencies. Sometimes I go down the rabbit hole on interesting things like zombie insects. I've got a good hydrangea one on there, probably something that will put you to sleep. At 3 a.m. if you have insomnia, but I guarantee you'll probably learn at least one thing before you fall asleep. So I'm going to go ahead and look at the chat box here and see if there are any questions. Let's see. We just grow a tray of microgreens per week. Super, super easy. Yes, very easy. And very easy to do with a cheap LED grow light from Amazon. I paid $7 the other day. Awesome. And you can put them in your house plants or anything. Is it okay to grow just one plant? Of course it is. You can put a blueberry bush in a pot and have blueberries, or you can grow basil and if you like basil. I mean, yeah, grow whatever you want. That's the beauty. No one's judging you. You can grow whatever you would like, whatever makes you happy. My kids and I did laundry basket potatoes this year. Yes, that's another excellent way of doing it. You can go to a dollar store and get these really cheap baskets, 25 store. And you get straw. So you could actually take some of the straw from the bale here and you line the inside of it. And then you put soil in there and you put your potato eyes. And as it grows up, you put more soil in there until it finally grows up and then it grows outside it. And you get, lots of potatoes that way. That's one of my favorite ways of doing it. Yes, good method. Let's see. Will a soil test find diseases like blight? Good question, and the answer is no. Most of our soil tests are strictly for fertility, meaning we're trying to find what the soil lacks. So we don't test for nitrogen because it's highly variable, but we do test for things like phosphorus and potassium, calcium, sulfur, some other stuff. You can test for a very comprehensive test that will catch all of that. But we're looking to see what the soil is lacking. So it'll give you recommendations. You need to add, 2 pounds of 10 10 10 fertilizer or whatever. And it does have a fertilizer calculator so that you can figure out what you already have. If it's different than what they recommend, the lab recommends, what the conversion is. So it'll give you a ratio conversion and tell you how many pounds you should add. So you did need to learn that math and algebra all those years ago. Here's where you're going to use it. Someone knows where you can buy bales. Yes, Home Depot, Lowe's, Ace Hardware, Tractor Supply. It's sold as wheat straw. So when you go in, ask them for, you don't want pine straw, you want wheat straw or mulch straw. Sometimes it's sold as mulch straw and you're using it if you seed a hillside or something with grass seed, and then you'll use this to distribute over the top of it, but it's just wheat straw. So if you say wheat straw, they'll know what you're talking about. I have a lot of bamboo growing, and you're welcome to come cut some. Yes, I do also. My neighbors have it, and I have used it for projects many times, but it always grows faster than. And yes, you can message it. That's funny. I tried straw bale gardening with students once before. Tixie and bought wheat straw, meant to, but ended up with more wheatgrass. Yes, it will sprout, but you can always go down and just like with grass, just kind of cut it off or just take a pair of scissors and chop it and it'll break down. So just like with a grass seed or any other seed, when you nip it before it gets to a certain stage, it's just going to wither and die. So just consider doing that. And yes, there are some seeds in there. It really depends a lot on how thorough that farmer was when they baled it up. But generally speaking, that wheat straw is going to have fewer seeds than hay will. Yes, it can be purchased. Straw can be purchased at Tractor Supply. Oh, 100% straw. Yes, nice. Um, Not super cheap, but you don't have to worry about the mulch straw tends to have more seeds. I've found because it's cheaper than the 100% straw. So yes, there's go to Tractor Supply. They have good stuff. I bought what was listed as wheat straw this year and it was full of seeds. Yes, again, there's a couple different classes of it. Mulch straw, or what they sell for that, tends to have more seeds in it, but apparently Tractor Supply has the good stuff. Kids are super excited to make bread from whole wheat. That's funny. Thank you. Yes. Yeah. I mean, hey, you could let it grow. You could just fertilize it and water it and harvest the wheat and make some bread. That's a nice little experiment. Yeah. Yeah. Let's see. Would straw bale planting work in Arizona? That is a good question. So Arizona tends to have a much more arid climate than we do. So you're going to have to probably water more and you're going to have to watch for dehydration more than you would here. But generally speaking, yes, you should be able to plant in a straw bale there. Uh, I don't see why not. I mean, sometimes we have really big heat domes that settle over here, and it can get up into the hundreds, um, high pressure. So very similar in some respects to some of the climates that you would see out in Arizona. And you just have to increase the amount of watering that you do. Know that a lot of plants are going to kind of go into a stasis, like tomatoes. They don't like to grow past 90 degrees, so they'll kind of just go into suspended animation and not really do a whole lot. So you might have to wait until the temperature drops, but yes, you should be able to grow them there. You're welcome. All right. Oh, thank you. Let's see. Yes, thank you for putting the link in there to all the YouTube videos. Let's see, anything else? The food forest, yes. Yeah, lots of information on food forests, and you can find out where they all are. Um, there is one in DeKalb County. It's the Embark. It's in the old YMCA camp. It was recently, well, a couple years ago, purchased by Embark Youth Farm, and they've got all the raised beds up, and they've started to put a food forest out there that's available for folks to come. The plants are all pretty young, but and also the YMCA on Sugarloaf in Gwinnett County also has blueberry bushes and some other stuff and part of their food forest. So it would be nice if we had a good place online where all of those could be listed, and maybe there are. If there is a place like that, send me an email and let me know. I'd love to know. We UGA periodically will reach out to each county and ask us to list all of the community gardens that we have. And I mean, the last time I did it 2 or 3 years ago, I think there were like 42 or 48 in Gwinnett County, which is just phenomenal. And I know I missed some, and there's more now. There is a good Facebook page that one of the master gardeners in Gwinnett, Tim Ledford, runs. And I cannot remember the name off the top of my head, but he does an excellent job of moderating that. And we've got folks from all over the state that jump on there, and it's a good place for information. But if anybody else doesn't have, if there's no other questions, I will go ahead and sign off. But again, you can use that QR code to take you to the YouTube. If you have questions or you want the slide deck or you have an idea for some type of a webinar you would like me to do the rabbit hole and dive down into, I am happy to contemplate that. And until next time, I do believe if you are signed up, there is one that's scheduled on June 19th. That is Juneteenth, and I didn't realize that. Still getting used to days off in the middle of the week that I didn't grow up with. So, because that's a relatively new federal holiday. So it's going to be moved to June 25th, which is, I believe, a Wednesday. So if you signed up for that one, I think that's production gardening. Know that you'll be getting an email about the date change. And if you're interested in that one and you couldn't make it on the that Thursday, it'll now be the 25th of June, which is, I believe, a Wednesday. So if you're interested in that, you can sign up for that. All of our classes, it'll be updated on our website. And that is about it. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. And I will say good night for now. Have a good evening. Thank you.